Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. It's a pleasure to see all of you. And thank you, Minister Huitfeldt, my dear Anniken, for being here in Ottawa. Ça me fait plaisir de t'avoir chez nous. Nous sommes vus à plusieurs reprises, un peu partout à travers le monde, particulièrement en Europe. Et nous avons travaillé ensemble pour répondre à l'invasion de l'Ukraine par la Russie. Et c'est toujours un plaisir de pouvoir compter sur ton appui et de travailler ensemble. The past year has tested us. It has tested the strength of our international system, of the rules that uphold our collective security. But it has also shown us the value of our alliances and our friendships, of the strength that can be found in unity. Norway, and Anniken in particular, has been such an important partner of Canada and of mine as we work together to defend our shared values. Because we both know that how we respond now and how we tackle the challenges that lie ahead will impact the citizens of both of our countries for generations. This is evident in Ukraine's fight for freedom and our support for that fight. Ukraine's security is Europe's security, and it is therefore our security and the world's security. Norway has demonstrated continued leadership in this regard, most recently, Anniken, with your multi-year support program for Ukraine, and I want to thank you personally for that. Canada, too, is looking at how we can support Ukraine in winning this war and how helping them rebuild following their victory. This includes supporting Ukrainians in their fight for justice and accountability for the countless crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression committed by Russia in Ukraine. En tant qu'amis proches de la Suède et de la Finlande, nous voulons nous assurer de leur accession et leur intégration au sein de l'OTAN. Nous sommes fiers d'avoir collaboré avec la Norvège dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques, qui constitue une menace existentielle pour tous les citoyens du monde, en tant que pays progressiste, engagé dans la lutte au changement climatique, et en tant également que de producteurs d'énergie. Nous avons beaucoup à apprendre les uns des autres, notamment en matière de transition juste, d'émissions net zéro et de sécurité énergétique. Norway and Canada are close friends, but if you change your perspective and look from above, you can see that we're nearly neighbors. So connected by the Arctic Ocean, we have a shared interest in ensuring it is a stable, prosperous, and environmentally sustainable region, a place where the rule of law prevails. As Norway assumes the chairship of the Arctic Council this year, they can count on Canada's cooperation. We will work together with them, other Arctic states, and Indigenous peoples of the region who must remain at the center of the decisions made about the North. We have had many good conversations on these topics and more over the past 2 days, and I'm looking forward to continuing them this afternoon as we find ourselves in a particularly challenging chapter of our history. I am glad that Canada has friends like Norway beside us as we chart a path forward. Alors en terminant, ça va me faire plaisir de continuer les conversations avec toi, ma chère Anniken, et alors qu'on est présentement dans un chapitre particulièrement difficile de notre histoire, je pense qu'on peut compter l'un sur l'autre pour faire en sorte de trouver des solutions pour la sécurité internationale. Donc, merci beaucoup.
So, dear Mélanie, I'm so happy to be here in Canada. I remember the first time we met, you invited me to come. Mm-hmm. And we were appointed in October 2021, both of us. At the same time, we got information about a possible Russian attack on Ukraine from the very first days, I think. Mm-hmm. And this was also the topic on the agenda when we met for the first time in NATO ministerial meeting in Riga a month later. Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you, Mélanie, for your very strong leadership within the NATO family after Russia decided to wage a brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. And we have been united in our solidarity with the Ukrainian people and our contribution of lethal and non-lethal aid to help the Ukrainian people win this war. After this visit, I will go back to the Norwegian Parliament on Tuesday, and we will adopt a multi-year package to assist Ukraine. This has broad bipartisan support. 95% of the MPs are behind. $7 billion will be provided over the next 5 years. This year, 50% will be military support. I am also grateful to Mélanie for her strong engagement for Swedish and Finnish NATO membership. We almost, Mélanie, had a competition on who of us that could sign the NATO accession protocol first.
And we did.
Yeah, because it was much easier to bring documents from Ottawa to Washington than from Oslo to Washington. So that was very easy to win that competition.
For once, we were close to.
Just as Canada eventually won another friendly competition between our two countries, the Moose Statue War that broke out between Canada and Norway some years ago. A small town in Norway erected a 10-meter-high moose statue to compete with the Canadian Macte Moose in Moose Jaw. That moose in Norway was the world's largest moose for a couple of months. Then the people in Moose Jaw started to fundraise a campaign in order to extend this Macte Moose antlers.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see here,
So
first 9.8, and then we competed 10.1.
in terms of height, and now we still beat you in terms of having the tallest moose in the world.
Yeah, so
That's
today
good
you
to know.
still have the biggest moose.
Thank you.
And the two communities, they actually also signed a peace deal where they decided to end this war and rather celebrate each other's. So fortunately, you can have this one.
Thank you, I appreciate it, thank you.
Canadians and Norwegians are really peaceful by nature.
Yes, we know that.
So, dear Mélanie, I studied contemporary foreign history, and my tutor told me then that in international organizations there has always been a strong cooperation between Norway and Canada. This is also my experience from various international organizations, such as our strong commitment to security, multilateralism, peace and reconciliation, development assistance, and defense of the rule of law, democratic values, women's rights, and LGBT plus rights. We are both Arctic nations, where we really experience the consequences of global warming. That is why we need to protect the Arctic Council, even though we cannot cooperate with Russia in the same way as we did before this terrible war broke out. We will find ways to continue to work together. Thank you, Mélanie.
Thank you, Anniken. So we're ready to take questions. Ça me fait plaisir de prendre les questions.
Hi, morning, CTV News. My first question is about China. President Xi Jinping today began his third consecutive term. I'm wondering if I get both of you on what your respective government's plans are to addressing more aggressive China, particularly Minister Joly, given recent events around foreign influence in our domestic affairs. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Our position on China was clearly highlighted back in November when I released our Indo-Pacific strategy. We said that we believe that China was an increasingly global power that was trying to bend the rules of the international system in its favor. And in that sense, we needed to challenge China when we ought to, and we need to cooperate with China when we must. And so in that sense, we've been very clear that we will challenge China on many issues. We will never tolerate, never accept any form of foreign interference. We will never accept any form of violation of our sovereignty and territorial integrity. And we also will make sure that we will engage with China and have difficult conversation with them. And we're following very closely the fact that President Xi is undergoing his third term, and that is a first in modern Chinese history.
First of all, I would like to say, Mélanie, that you presented this strategy and you talked about it in the ministerial meeting in NATO, and you gave me a physical copy, and I told my people in the ministry to read through it, because this was very important, I think, also to get the inspiration from this Canadian strategy for several European countries. And for Norway, we will do business with China, but we will protect, of course, critical infrastructure, such as ports, 5G nets, and also we need to decrease our vulnerability when it comes to supply chain. But we will engage with China on areas like climate, where we really need a stronger international cooperation. Human rights will always be on the agenda when we meet with our Chinese counterparts. So we will continue to work on that.
My follow-up is for Minister Joly. This is a question from my colleague. What is the status of Canada's plans to repatriate the Canadian women and children in northeast Syria? And will those plans include separating children from their non-Canadian mothers?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you've heard me many times on this issue. I've been very concerned about the fact that women, and particularly children, are held and detained in northeast Syria because of the growing difficult conditions of the camps. As it is now known, there is a settlement that has been agreed between parties, including the Canadian government, with the families of the women and children detained. So our goal is to make sure that they can come back, and of course that they will face justice. Our goal also is always to make sure that the security and safety of Canadians is ensured. When it comes to case-by-case basis, I won't comment on the different cases, but of course, for me, what is really important is that these children come back here, because unfortunately, they are the victims of this entire situation.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Marie-Charlotte Johnson de Radio-Canada. Pour continuer sur la question de mes collègues sur la Chine,
Oui.
La Chine a dit que le Canada nuit à sa réputation, surtout par rapport à la question des postes de police qu'on a vus à travers le pays. On se demandait, avez-vous des discussions là-dessus avec vos homologues, que ce soit les ambassadeurs ou vos homologues en Chine directement?
Je pense que cette question elle a été clairement évoquée par le ministre de la Sécurité publique parce que la GRC a fermé des stations de police. Il va de soi qu'on jamais on va accepter qu'il y ait une violation de la Convention de Vienne parce que c'est fondamental que les diplomates au Canada respectent les conventions internationales et bien entendu nos lois. Jamais on va accepter quelconque forme d'ingérence étrangère. Jamais on va accepter quelconque forme d'intimidation de la part de forces chinoises ou autres à l'encontre de nos citoyens. Et donc, il va de soi que pour nous, c'est extrêmement important. Alors, j'en ai parlé directement avec mon collègue chinois lorsque je l'ai rencontré. Récemment, en fait la semaine passée. J'en avais parlé aussi avec mon ancien homologue chinois lorsque je l'avais rencontré au mois de novembre. L'ambassadeur chinois a été semoncé à plusieurs reprises ici à Ottawa et nous avons fait des représentations également à Beijing. Donc, j'ai répondu à ces questions hier lorsque j'étais devant le comité.
Puis en suivi, justement, votre collègue, M. Minichino, propose un registre pour les agents étrangers. On se demandait, est-ce que ce genre de registre-là aurait pu prévenir qu'il y ait des postes de police chinois tout proche de votre circonscription?
Ben, je ne peux pas aller dans le détail, puis ni répondre à des questions hypothétiques, mais ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que les consultations ont été lancées en effet par mon collègue aujourd'hui, et c'est important qu'on prenne une décision sur cette question-là. Ce que je peux aussi ajouter, c'est que j'ai eu des conversations avec mon homologue australienne parce qu'on sait que l'Australie a fait face à d'immenses pressions de la part de la Chine et fait encore face à d'immenses pressions de la part de la Chine, a décidé de prendre des actions décisives en matière d'ingérence étrangère et certainement nous inspirons de ce modèle.
Hi there, Dylan Robertson
Hi,
of the
Dylan.
Canadian Press. Thanks for
Good to
taking
see
our
you.
questions.
Yeah.
So
It's great
Minister,
you follow me everywhere I go. Good to see you
I
again,
always
Dylan.
do, which is why I noticed this morning you used a term that I haven't heard you use before, referring to Russia. You talked about regime change. And I was just wondering, at what point in time did that become Canada's policy to advocate for? And I wanted to ask Minister Huitfeldt if that's the right approach to advocate for when it comes to Russia.
Well, we believe that we need to isolate Russia diplomatically, economically, and politically, and that is the regime that I'm referring to, of course. And as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, I always make a difference between the regime and the people of a given country, which is fundamental. I think also that we've imposed very strong sanctions, more than 2,000 sanctions since the beginning of the war. The goal is definitely to do that, is to weaken Russia's ability to launch very difficult attacks against Ukraine. We want also to make sure that Putin and his enablers are held to account, and that's why I also referred to the different actions we're taking regarding accountability when it comes to war crimes, when it comes to crimes against humanity, and also the crime of aggression. Now, the other thing, Dylan, which is really important is we need to make sure that we engage with many countries around the world to highlight the fact that we need to denounce this war, because this war is going against the very principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that are embedded in the UN Charter. Now, we call on China to make sure that President Xi has a conversation with President Zelensky. President Zelensky and President Xi have not had a phone call since February 24th of 2022. We deplore that. We think China can and must play a role in obviously not supporting Russia, but more than that, in helping to solve this war. And that's exactly what I mentioned to my Chinese counterpart also when I met him yesterday. China is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It has a duty to defend the UN Charter, and it has also a specific role to play in this context to bring much more stability to the European region. Alors, qu'est-ce que j'ai dit? Petite blague, je m'en rappelle bien. Donc, différentes choses. Pour nous, il va de soi que notre objectif, c'est d'isoler la Russie d'un point de vue économique, d'un point de vue diplomatique, d'un point de vue politique. Ça a été l'objectif de notre travail depuis le début, que ce soit en imposant des sanctions. Nous sommes à près de 2000 sanctions à ce jour, que nous avons fait avec que nous avons mis en œuvre avec plusieurs de nos collègues, certainement nos partenaires européens et américains. Et aussi, nous avons travaillé très fort sur les questions de responsabilité des personnes qui commettent des crimes de guerre, des crimes contre l'humanité ou encore le crime d'agression, qui est celui de l'invasion par la Russie de l'Ukraine. Nous pensons également que la Chine devrait jouer un rôle encore plus clair lorsque vient sa volonté de cesser les hostilités en Ukraine. Le président Xi n'a toujours pas parlé au président Zelensky depuis le 24 février, alors que la Chine parle tout le temps qu'elle veut amener la paix dans la région. Alors, nous pensons qu'il devrait être clair que le président Xi parle au président Zelensky. C'est la seule façon de pouvoir entendre la version de l'Ukraine qui est envahie par sa voisine. Dans les circonstances, j'ai fait mention de cette demande à mon homologue chinois lorsque je l'ai rencontré la semaine dernière, comment je peux dire, dans le contexte du G20. Merci.
just want to echo Mélanie when she said that these sanctions are not aimed against the Russian people. It's Putin. It's against Putin's ability to continue this brutal war. So that's why we introduce all these sanctions against him.
Good. And I have a two-parter question, as always. Canada is closing down First Nations fish farming in Discovery Bay in BC. This is impacting 3 Norwegian companies. Last week, police in Oslo arrested Greta Thunberg at a protest supporting Indigenous Sami people who were upset at wind turbines. So, Minister Joly, did you or any of the Indigenous leaders bring up the Discovery Bay issue in your talks with your colleague? And for Minister Huitfeldt, have you raised the fishery closure with Canada? And if either of you have thoughts on the environment and reconciliation, I'm all ears.
Well, actually, I raised this when I met representative from Indigenous people's organizations yesterday. So I brought this up on the agenda myself because the Prime Minister met the Sami Parliament in Norway yesterday, and he has given his apologies to the Sami reindeer herders in Fosen. And we acknowledge that the decision to award licenses to build and operate the wind turbines have a substantive negative impact on their ability to practice their own culture in violation of human rights. So I think it's important that we admit that. And I wrote it up on the agenda yesterday when I met with these organizations.
And Dylan, so you know the official bilateral meeting between Anniken and I is happening just after this. So of course I will raise it.
You're referring to, I'm sorry, which of the two, the fisheries or the Thunberg case, or both?
So the question of the fisheries, when it comes to dealings with Indigenous people within Norway, of course this is a national issue for Norway, and we do not get involved. We've shared our own experience with dealing with reconciliation. Norway is undergoing a very important truth and reconciliation work. Particularly, there is a commission that is undergoing, and looking forward to working with Norway to share what is our experience as we implement the TRC report. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.